On this Wednesday edition of the OFN Today, Marc Lawrence of experts.covers.com will help me to preview key games in college football and the NFL with analysis and picks. Meanwhile, special guest Justin Grasso, co-editor for Inside the Eagles at Fansided, will update the latest Eagles news before their London game this week against the Jags. As the OFN Today on the Our-Lads Football Radio Network starts now. It's Wednesday, October 24th, 2018. I'm Greg DePalma. Thanks for tuning in to the OFN Today. The OFN Today is brought to you by ourlads.com, providing the best pro and college football depth charts on the net. StoreStreams.com, the StoreStreams music service, offers a complete solution for restaurants, bars, hotels, and retailers of all sizes. And Covers.com, featuring live score, stats, and odds, considered the most convenient and entertaining source for sports news and facts, with over 45 million visits a year. All right, so we are now finally at the midway point. I guess you can call it the midway point over the next couple of weeks, Mark, in the NFL. And the defending Super Bowl champs, in the game that we're going to get started with, first of all, they have dropped below the 500 line. They're going to London to take on the team that was the runner-up in the AFC Championship game last year that is also dipped below the 500 line. It's still going to be an interesting game, especially because of how desperate both teams will be to want to avoid going 3-5. Even though I think the fans in London were probably expecting some superstar matchup of two top teams in the NFL. I'm not so sure that they've got that right now.
Well, they don't have it, at least from our perspective, given the fact of the condition of these two teams, as you just said, Greg, both deeply disappointing this football season here. The Eagles off that big game that they blew last week against the Panthers, the Jaguars on a 3-game losing streak. But nonetheless, they are two of the marquee names in the National Football League, and I'm sure the fans over there are more concerned about how they play this game on Sunday as opposed to how they've been playing. I think the one edge that if Jacksonville might have in this game in their hopes of finding a way into the win column is the fact that they played more games in London than any other team in the National Football League, 5 of them, and they've won and covered 3 of them. So they've been there before, so they're acclimated at least to London from that standpoint. But we'll see whether or not they can get their act together behind Blake Bortles this Sunday or not.
Do you take into account those games? Have they been recent enough? I mean, are there enough players on the team that where they can have an edge?
Well, I think there are. The series started in 2007, so it's just a little more than 10 years along the international series in London, but it's so involved, complicated when it comes to planning and making a trip to go to London. I mean, everything is all planned in advance, families, trips, hotel rooms, everything like that. The travel factor. It's a big, huge issue for teams that aren't involved with it or aren't experienced. Teams that are experienced, they know the routine. They know the hotels, they know the restaurants, they know the food, they know the scene. So I think that's an edge in Jacksonville's favor that perhaps Philadelphia doesn't have this week.
All right, well, Jacksonville's going to need all the edge they're going to get because I'm not sure all of that's going to help them. I know the Eagles aren't playing their best. They should have closed out Carolina last week, and things would be looking a lot better with back-to-back wins, back-to-back comfortable wins, but then they fell apart in the fourth quarter, and now here they are shaking their heads once again, trying to get out of this quicksand of a season that they're dealing with. But the Eagles, at least when they're losing, it's not like they're losing the way the Jags are losing. I mean, the Jags are losing ugly. I mean, if we didn't even have last season, we would just be talking about, this is just the same old Jags. They stink. I mean, they didn't ever get any better. But we had last season, so we expect more from this team. But they've lost 3 straight up and against the spread by a 90-28 margin. And even though I wouldn't normally want to take the Eagles right now, especially since they're 1-5 against the spread in their last 6 games, It is only 3 points. I mean, who knows? Maybe we see what happened last week, and the Eagles win the game, and Jacksonville goes for 2, and then Eagles win and don't cover. It's possible the way these two teams are going, but I got to go with the Eagles. I can't take the Jags right now. Their defense, right? I think they've just completely had it with Blake Bortles.
Well, they're going to give him another chance. That'll be good for openers at least. The bad news is that in his career in the NFL, when Bortles has taken on an opponent that comes off a straight-up upset favorite loss the previous game, he's been in 12 of those games. He's only 1-11 straight up and 2-10 to the spread. So he's going to have to obviously rectify that. But
yeah.
but what concerns me about this game is that 2 weeks ago, Jay Kornegay at the Westgate Superbook in Las Vegas, they send out lines on NFL games a week in advance. So you can study what the odds makers' line perception on the games were. Well, 2 weeks ago when this game was sent out, it was sent out at Pick'em. And so now it's Philadelphia 3.
That was before the Giant game?
That was before the Giant game,
okay.
Correct. So what happens? It's perception, okay? And so they're perceiving Jacksonville to be downtrodden, but what they're overlooking is the fact that Philadelphia is playing equally rotten football as well. This team is coming into this game. They're just 1-5 to the spread their last 6 games. They've been out-yarded each of the last 3 contests in a row. That's what I call leaking oil, and you don't trust favorites that are being out-yarded consistently like the Eagles are right now. So what have the Eagles done to warrant moving from pick to -3 other than it all being anti-Jacksonville?
Yeah.
And I think, yes, there's a case for anti-Jacksonville. And, the simple fact of the matter is, what's wrong with Jacksonville? Well, it's real simple. You go back and look at the last 5 games. This football team has been lost to turnovers 14-2. You can't keep turning the ball over and be in a -12 deficit over 5 games and expect to do any good. So they're going to have to, number one, do a better job.
Bench Bortles.
A lot of it's Bortles for
yeah.
sure. A lot of it is. So that's one factor to the football game. But the other is that. And I'm not making a big case for Jacksonville here because I don't like the game. I don't like the game. All I'm saying here is be careful because Philadelphia does not warrant moving from pick to 3 on their recent style of play. They're playing as poorly as Jacksonville is right now. So that's my observation. If this game were Pick'em, I'd say it's a real tough call and a real good line, but it's not. It's Philadelphia -3, and I don't think this is a good line.
Yeah, and again, as I just said, last week the game was decided on a 2-point conversion attempt, and so the 3 wasn't well, if it would have been 3, it wouldn't have been good enough. So these things happen. We've seen more and more teams this season win and not cover. And matter of fact, I seem to be hitting all of them. It's killing me this year. Seriously. I mean, it's like 3 games a week now, and usually the average is like 1 or 2. This year it's been like 3 a week. And then people might think that's, well, what's wrong with that? 3 out of the games. But that's actually a higher percentage of wins and not covering. So if you're going to be worried about a 3 in a game, I would be worried about this one, believe it or not. And look, we don't know if Jacksonville is going to just turn it on. That's it. We don't know. Now, Fournette's still out. That's the big deal for me. See, if Fournette comes back soon enough, I will then give the Jags a shot. But until at least Fournette gets back on the field, I just cannot believe in Jacksonville. I just can't. I believe in the Eagles a bit more. But like you said, big warning on the Eagles because they just haven't been covering. All right, so...
hey, Greg, let me say this
sure.
real quick before we move on,
sure.
okay? You mentioned about winning and no covering, okay?
Mm-hmm.
In the National Football League this season, there have been 15 teams that have won and not covered games, okay? So, that's about averaging about two a week, okay, if you will. And it's a little bit higher than normal. But there's an answer. There's a remedy to that. And the remedy is it's from the school that I come from. I come from the Woody Hayes School of Handicapping. And Woody Hayes said that if you bet on a favorite, 3 things can happen, and 2 of them are bad. If you bet on an underdog, 3 things can happen, and 2 of them are good. So my remedy to this whole situation is don't bet favorites.
All right.
Plain and simple.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
I mean, I prefer that in college football, especially with all the upsets that you can get and the double-digit ones that I like. But we'll get to college in just a bit. Speaking of double-digit favorites, Kansas City is a Big Ten now over Denver, and they should be. Look, I'm going to go back to Vance Joseph and his road record because against Arizona, I don't care about that. It's Arizona. They're pathetic. But Joseph is 0-6 straight up and against the spread as a road dog since being the head coach last year. Throw in the fact that the Chiefs are 6-0 straight up and against the spread in their last 6 versus Denver, as well as a 27-23 win earlier this year as a 3.5-point favorite. And the fact that the Chiefs are 7-0 against the spread this year, and this game is almost too easy for me, that I'm afraid.
Well, I understand the Vance Joseph thing. I understand the Denver Broncos scenario and what they're getting into here right now. But you're looking at a line in the series here that's sort of in uncharted waters, if you will. The Denver Broncos, I don't have in my database when they've taken 10 points from Kansas City. They've been favored double digits a couple of times, but this is obviously a whole new different Kansas City football team. The line on this game at Cantor Gaming in Las Vegas before the season began was Kansas City minus 3.5. So you've got a game that's moved a full touchdown based upon what has happened on the start of the season this year, and a lot of that is based here on the fact that Kansas City is a perfect 7-0 to the spread this year. So they're not only winning games, they're covering spreads. So you're paying a price for their success, and the price here is a touchdown. So now you look at the football game, and what have we got in the game that's coming in here? If you put tape over these two teams, what I see is an Achilles heel for Kansas City that goes into a strong Denver strength. And that Achilles heel for Kansas City is their rush defense. They're allowing 5.2 yards a carry. The Denver Broncos gain 5.1 yards a carry. That is a 5-by-5 running dog, which you don't get too many of. You don't see too many of at all. In fact, in my database, I go back to 1980. There have only been 12 of them, 12 such occurrences with this wide gap in the running game. And when we've had that, and you've had an underdog of 3 or more points in games like this, only one of them is lost to the spread. So what you're talking about with Denver here is a team that will effectively be able to run the ball, keep the ball out of Patrick Mahomes' hands, shorten the clock, and shorten the game down. So from that standpoint, and the fact that this is a division dog who knows their opponent real well, you've got everybody in the country, fans, sharps, experts, all on the Kansas City Chiefs because they're on television a lot. They're watching these teams just wax other teams. They're like a runaway freight train right now. But I'm going to caution you about the Denver Broncos in the situation that they're in here. A 5-by-5 running dog does not lose very often at all.
Well, look, here's the thing. I think this represents possibly another win and no cover scenario, possibly. It is a division rivalry and all of that, and Denver played them well and probably should have won when they played in Denver. That's why I said this game looks too easy, because the games that look too easy to me, I sometimes don't even take because it's too easy. And that's what this is. It is still too easy because the bottom line is Vance Joseph can't coach, and Andy Reid is right now the best coach in football this season. He's been a master. And Mahomes is the hottest quarterback on the planet. So there's so many things going for the Chiefs, but yeah, you've got warning signs. You just gave the listeners one, so just keep in mind all the good stuff and how easy this looks. There's that warning sign that Mark just gave you in case you don't want to be too optimistic about it. All right, Cleveland and Pittsburgh will wrap up the NFL, and these two teams have battled it out in some pretty good games over the last few years. Even though Pittsburgh is 6-0-1 in the last 7, including the tie in Week 1, the Browns are 3-0-1 against the spread in the last 4, with those 4 decided by 4 or less. This is an 8-point spread. Cleveland's in desperate mode. They know if they lose this game, any playoff possibilities are probably done. 3 overtime games in the last 4. You wonder if that's, if they're going to have one of those games where it's finally going to catch up to them. But then again, maybe they had that against the Chargers. I don't know. This is a tough one. It's a lot of points, 8 points. I know some people might think the Steelers are ready to roll. They beat the Bengals. They've won a couple of games, but I don't know. I mean, I don't like taking points without going with the win in the NFL. But I don't know if I can take the Browns to just cover. I don't know. And I don't think they're going to win. I just don't know if I could take Pittsburgh right here.
Well, from a scheduling standpoint, this is all Pittsburgh here. They have a week of rest. The Browns come in after having played 4 overtime games this year, 3 in the last 4 weeks. So you do have a freshened up Steeler football team against what might be a tired Cleveland Browns football team. But I'm going to say this. If you go back and you look at the last 4 years that Cleveland has traveled to Pittsburgh, this is the most points they've taken in the last 4 years. And there have been some pretty bad Cleveland Browns teams in the past, worse than this team. This Pittsburgh Steelers team here, they may be following a pattern here. Last year, they got out to that ragged start last year, and then they went 10-1 to close out the season here. They got out to a 2-1 start this year, and they've won a game since. So they could be on this path to the playoffs here again. But what they don't have is obviously Le'Veon Bell in the backfield here. And while they do have a week of rest, they've really struggled with a week of rest in the past. They're just 2-9 to the spread the last 11 games, including 0-7 when they're off a win. You're talking about the Cleveland Browns here, who may be fatigued or tired, and they have allowed an average of 470 yards a game in the last 4 games. That's my biggest concern, is this defense, which was top 10 in the league last year, is suddenly evaporating here. And I don't know if it's a lack of discipline, what's going on, but they're going to have to shore things up defensively if they want to get themselves back into football games. And we also called this out in our newsletter this week that Baker Mayfield, in his career at Oklahoma and with Cleveland, when he's been off a loss, he's bounced back. He's won 5 out of 6 times. He's only lost back-to-back games once with Oklahoma and with the Browns. That one loss was last week, and that was a tough overtime beat, which they could have very easily have won the football game as well. So bottom line to me here is it's too many points in a division game, a rivalry especially, a rivalry as tense as this one is. So I'm going to hold my nose and play the Cleveland Browns and take the points.
All right, let's roll through these college games. Iowa, Penn State, and Penn State's nearly a touchdown favorite in this one. They haven't looked good. They just haven't. They dropped 2. They had a close win against Indiana. Iowa, though, is playing their best football of the year. They've won 3 straight up and against the spread by a 113-47 margin. They have a real good chance of getting to the Big Ten championship game. Purdue is next week. They got Northwestern in a few weeks, so they don't want to drop this one either. Penn State still has a chance also for the Big Ten championship now that Ohio State's got a loss, and they play Michigan next week on the road, so they know they can't drop one. But I just like the way Iowa's playing. I really do. And I think Stanley is a sleeper NFL draft pick, somebody that can get picked up in the 3rd or 4th round and might be able to I actually like him better than Beathard, and Beathard's been playing a lot because of injuries. So I'll go with Iowa in this one, getting 6.
I couldn't disagree with you, Greg. They're playing as good as anybody in the Big Ten right now, maybe right next to Michigan. And this defense is for real. They rank 3rd overall nationally, 2nd in rush defense. And that's the same commodity that they bring to the table in this game that Michigan State brought when they went into Penn State. A stifling rush defense, a top 10 ranked defense. And that's what took Penn State down in that football game. And you're also talking about the fact, and I like your call, that Iowa could be the sleeper team in the Big Ten Conference. They could win the Big Ten West and be the only one-loss team out of the Big Ten, and they could have a dilemma then. All of a sudden, do you take a one-loss team, Iowa, into the playoffs, or do you let them go? So, they're sort of controlling their own destiny here, if you will, in that sense. Penn State's going nowhere. They're not even going to sniff the playoffs with the 2 losses, and they blew those 2 losses at home when they had fourth-quarter leads. I think they have to be second-guessing themselves right now. And they're also coming in after having allowed Indiana a season-high 549 yards in their last football game. With Michigan on deck, I think Iowa is the only way you can look in this game.
All right, Washington State. We talked about that game last week, and boy, were they come through big time. I think I've had them as my top pick 3 times this year, and obviously they're 3-0 because they haven't lost a cover all year. So they're on the road here, getting about 3-4 points at Stanford. To me, it's just all about Bryce Love, and he's just not 100%. You take Bryce Love out of the equation because Stanford only wants to run the football, even though they have Costello, and he's even dealing with a hand injury. Washington State, I think right now they're the better team. Now, that doesn't mean anything in football. Anything can happen, but also consider that the Cougars are 2-1 straight up, 3-0 against the spread the last 3 years versus Stanford. And these both, even though both of these teams are fighting it out in the North, so this is a big game for both teams. Whoever loses is going to be out of the equation. Whoever wins has still got a shot. Washington State and Stanford both a half game back of Washington. By the way, next week Stanford at Washington, but I'm just going to keep rolling with Washington State until I lose a cover with them.
Well, I'm on the bandwagon with you. I've been on Washington State from the get-go this year. I think they're the best team in the Pac-12 conference right now. If for no other reason, they're the only team with just one loss in the Pac-12 conference this year. And it's all turned around with their quarterback, Gardner Minshew. We call him Ginsu, and he's diced up the Oregon secondary last week. But their defense had sharpened knives last week as well. They held Oregon to 1 yard of offense in the first 27 minutes of that game. This Washington State defense is completely under the radar right now. They're playing as good as anybody in that conference. In fact, they're one of only 6 teams, Washington State is this year, that has won the yards in every football game they played. They're perfect in the stats thus far this football season here. I think they're legitimate. Their only loss, Greg, you go back and you look at that loss at Southern Cal, and they lost by 3 points.
Yep.
In a game that
on a blocked field goal.
Well, it was a blocked field goal, but even worse than that. Before that even happened, late in the fourth quarter, there was a targeting call that should have been called against Washington State by a Southern Cal player. In fact, they're up in arms about that. Even the Pac-12 conference is trying to keep pushing this under the rug and under the carpet here. It was, as Rick Neuheisel says, it was the textbook classic example of what targeting is in college football. And if that call is made, Washington State has first and goal, and they win the football game. They don't lose the football game. It wasn't made. They got sacked. They went back and missed a field goal and ended up losing the football game. So they could very well be an undefeated football team is what I'm trying to say here. Stanford, you mentioned about Bryce Love, not the same football team. He's not healthy. It's like a racehorse. You don't bet on a racehorse in a stake race. If he's not healthy, you just don't do it.
Sure.
Washington State brings the better offense and the better defense into this football game. And I like these two little common facts that are happening here right now. Washington State has outscored their opponents 93-25 in the fourth quarter of football games this year. Stanford has been outscored 30-0 in the fourth quarter of the last 3 football games. So one team's dying late and the other's coming alive late. I'm with you. I think Washington State's the better team, and I think they win this game.
All right, and then we've got a huge game of the year right now in the Sun Belt. And we actually have a bunch of good college football games on Thursday and Friday to watch, which is unusual. Appalachian State at Georgia Southern. The problem is with this rivalry is it's been completely one-sided the last few years. App State has dominated, winning all 3 straight up and against the spread by a 92-29 margin. They are a 3-way tie for the lead in the Sun Belt. There will be a championship game this year, so 2 of the 3, App State, Georgia Southern, Troy, one of the 3, I should say, they're going to represent the East, and then the West winner will play in the Sun Belt championship game. So this is a kind of elimination game. Even though Moore went down, the star running back, this kid Evans has done a really good job in his place. He had a big game last week, so and they still have Zach Thomas, a quarterback, and he's had a good season. I don't really trust Georgia Southern in this spot, especially with the rivalry the way it's gone the last few years. It's an 8-point spread. It's high, but I don't think it really hasn't mattered over the last few years in this series, so I'm not so sure why I should be worried about it now.
Well, a couple of reasons here. You should be concerned if you like Appalachian State. Number one, they just entered the AP Top 25 poll for the first time in their school history.
Okay.
And you'll oftentimes find teams with their heads in the clouds after doing just that. You've seen so many teams that make that first appearance, and they're also in the also votes the next week. Okay, because it's drinking champagne. They have the champagne high from doing that. Number two, Georgia Southern, as you said, is in a three-way tie with App State and Troy in the East Division inside that conference here. This football team can play. They've got a running game that's fifth ranked nationally in rushing offense here. If they can control the ball on the ground in this football game, and you mentioned Jalen Moore being out for App State, this will be their first true road game without him. So we're going to find out whether this backup is good or not. But the bottom line here is Georgia Southern has a powerful running offense. I think they're a live home dog in this game. If for no other reason, everybody's talking about App State, the new top 25 team from the Sun Belt Conference, and totally ignoring Georgia Southern in this contest here. I'm going to play Georgia Southern in the upset.
All right, and then the last one is going to be your Rodney Dangerfield, your sleeper game of the week. And South Florida and Houston. And South Florida is the undefeated team, but they're getting about 8 points in this game, which, look, it's a lot of points. It's the only thing that concerns me. I think you throw out the points, and I'd be all over Houston in this one. I think Houston's just a better team. I don't care about being undefeated. I mean, South Florida is lucky to be undefeated. They probably should have lost 2 or 3 games. First time they've been on the road and been a dog all year. And they're 2-5 against the spread. And Houston's beaten them in all 3 of their AAC meetings. I'm only worried a little bit about Ed Oliver. He's dealing with a knee injury. That's definitely something to be concerned about. But again, Houston's the better team. The only question is, for me, is the spread.
Well, this is a lack of respect play here for me with South Florida here, undefeated as they are. They're playing with triple revenge. That loss they suffered last year was a costly loss. It was a horrific loss. They should have won the football game and didn't. In fact, they were undefeated at the time, and it may have cost them going into the Central Florida game. But the bottom line here is the Bulls have won 20 of the last 22 football games they played. They're averaging 35.5 points a game, tied for 11th in total offense in the country. And as I mentioned, that triple revenge, they're a perfect 6-0 to the spread the last 6 games when they've had conference revenge. You're talking about a Houston football team that is all offense and no defense. They rank 117th in the country in total team defense here. And this is also a Houston team that in the last 10 times when they've taken on conference opponents that have had revenge, they're just 1-9 against the spread. So I'm going to throw out these numbers to you and say, okay, well, we're talking about a USF football team, pretty potent, averaging 35.5 points a game on the season here, playing a Houston Cougar team who's defensively deficient. If you look at Houston as home favorites, in games they allow 20 or more points, and they're 2-14 against the spread. I just think this is an overlay in a football game to an undefeated Rodney Dangerfield type dog here. I'm going to play South Florida plus the points, and what might, if it's not an upset, I believe they'll at least cash this ticket.
Yeah, I think the thing to consider is when you're looking for good upsets, it's never a bad idea to look for good upsets when you're going to be taking the undefeated team. You know, you got the undefeated team getting 8. From a pretty good conference, then I don't think it's one of those things where I don't think anybody would fault you for doing that.
Because this undefeated team is coming here to win the game. They're not just coming to play close.
That's right.
They're coming to win this football game.
And with the revenge you were talking about, too.
Right, exactly.
That's big. Okay, sounds good, Mark. Appreciate it as always. Enjoy the football, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Hey, my pleasure. As always, Greg, be good, and I'll catch up with you next week. Be
Excellent.
Good.
Thanks, Mark. That's Marc Lawrence. And, again, Mark is with us every Wednesday to preview the games in college football and the NFL. And Mark's website is at playbook.com. You could also go to his newest website as the founder of Sports Data University at sportsdata.com. You could follow Mark on Twitter at Marc Lawrence. So, by the way, Teddy Savransky will be with me tomorrow, also from covers.com. We've got more NFL and college games to go over with Ted. I wait until this show is over, and then I think about exactly which games that we haven't really talked about and which games I might not talk about on tomorrow's college football show with Mitch Light, so we can get a variety of games to cover. And the other thing, too, is I know we haven't talked about it much. Not that I will with Ted, because I know Ted's not a futures guy, so I won't get too much into that. But there's also other things to talk about, and that includes conference races in college basketball and even in the NFL with division races and playoffs and things like that. So since we're kind of at the midway point the next 2 weeks, it may not be a bad idea to touch up on that on tomorrow's show with Teddy, and that's something we'll probably do. And by the way, tomorrow, Scott Engel will be with me from Roto Experts. Usually he's on Mondays, but we switched it to Thursdays this week. So Scott will be with me to talk fantasy football on tomorrow's show, and Bill Huber will be with me tomorrow to talk Packers football, as the Packers will take on the undefeated Rams on Sunday. So that's tomorrow's OFN Today. So let's talk some Eagles football, though, first before we close up here. And the Eagles are going to be headed to London. We talked about that in the open with Mark. They're going to take on the Jacksonville Jags. Disappointing loss for the Eagles, to drop to 3-4, Justin, as I welcome in Justin Grasso to the program, just when it looked like everything was starting to go back to normal.
Right. How you doing, Greg?
Doing good, Justin. So that stung, didn't it?
It did. It was tough. Definitely tough when your defense blows a 17-point lead in the fourth quarter.
What's the reaction? I'm intrigued to know. How do you feel about this? Being that you've especially the fans that are older than you that have waited their whole lives, you get a Super Bowl win, and then the next season. How is that feeling? See, I've always thought of myself without a Super Bowl in my entire life, that when the Jets win a Super Bowl, it's going to take several years before I really, really, really care about losses, right, where I'll be like, all right, I'm disappointed, it stinks, but hey, I won the Super Bowl last year. Right. So is that kind of the way the Eagles fans are feeling, or is it different?
Yeah. So when the Eagles won the Super Bowl, a lot of people said that they would feel that way. And now that the season's here and, the hangover is clearly here, nobody feels that way.
Sure.
Spoiled. So definitely, yeah, everyone definitely they went back to normal real quick.
Okay. So why did they fall apart last week? And did it have anything to do with partly of what's been going on with the team so far this season?
Well, I definitely see it as, I think all season long we kind of had, a problem with defensive adjustments. And I don't think Jim Schwartz, ever since the Super Bowl, his secondary let up. It was like a little over 500 yards to Tom Brady. And ever since then, we haven't really seen it kind of get back to normal. And he just hasn't really adjusted. And what was working in the first half, he kind of shied away from in the second half. So that's when we saw the whole collapse. And the Panthers putting up 21 unanswered points, and then you look at the offense, and they're short-staffed. There's too many injuries. The offensive line isn't as good as they were. Carson Wentz couldn't find his clutch gene this weekend, so we couldn't win in the end there. So it's just like it's really an overall loss. There's no one thing you can point the finger at. The whole team lost that game.
Is when you take a look at how the team can get better. You talk, of course, there are some injuries that you're not going to get J.J. back and so forth. But are there? Can you look at the team and go, okay, there are a few guys banged up, and we'll get those guys back, and we'll get these guys straightened out? Is there still? And this is the NFL, so we're just about at the midway point. So teams can definitely go on a roll as late as December and win a Super Bowl. So can you still see that happen? I mean, the Redskins aren't winning this division, are they?
I don't know. It's tough, but I hope not. No, there's Mike Wallace is on the IR. They're hopeful that he can come back.
Okay.
But that's one of those things where, he broke his leg and needs to use his legs. Mm-hmm. So how useful is he going to be when he gets back? Then there's also Mac Hollins, who's been on the IR the entire season. So who knows when he's going to come back. So it's one of those things where it's like we're sitting around waiting for a trade because obviously we know Howie Roseman to be, pretty active in trading. But right now, none of that's happening. So everyone wants Le'Veon Bell. Everybody wants, I think the latest one is Deshaun Jackson they want. So we're expecting the Eagles to make a trade. I don't think we can really rely on anybody coming back from injuries right now to help out.
But you don't think that? See, I would think that Roseman would okay, trades are fine. Let's see if we can make a few deals. Like some of the players, well, look, Le'Veon Bell's maybe a little different. I'm not sure what the Steelers are expecting this late in the season with a guy that the Eagles wouldn't even be sure if they'd be able to retain. So I don't even know if you can get third or fourth round draft pick. So those are okay for me, I would think, but because I would think that Roseman's probably saying, hey, man, I mean, I got a lot of credibility going on here. Why should I even mortgage anything if we have a bad year? Seriously, is anybody really going to complain? So why should I do that? Mortgage draft pick. So I think you would agree. I don't think we're going to expect any major, like we've seen with Amari Cooper. Oh, we're going to give you a first-round draft pick to get this play. I can't see the Eagles doing anything like that.
Yeah, there's no way they give up. I think the Cowboys were crazy for making that deal.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, there were rumors going around saying that the Eagles offered a second round for Amari Cooper. Quickly, I think it was Benjamin Albright shut that down and said that, his sources said, none of that was true, but, who knows. But, I don't think if they're not getting like Le'Veon Bell, I don't think a second rounder is getting dealt. And I don't even think they would pay a second rounder for Le'Veon Bell at this point.
All right. So is there – now you mentioned the offensive line. Why particularly are they not playing to their capability? Any particular reason? Because I'd rather have an offensive line that has talent that's not playing well, that doesn't have any major injuries, because sooner or later maybe they'll just start picking it up.
Yeah, I mean, Lane Johnson had a slow start to the season, which was surprising because last year he was our best lineman. But then come to find out he was dealing with, ankle, I think it was an ankle sprain, high ankle sprain. So he's playing through it, which he wasn't bad last week. He wasn't bad the week before either.
Okay.
But I think that's his issue. And then on the other side, you have Jason Peters, who he's probably on like his third injury this season. And he actually, surprisingly, didn't miss the rest of the season. He has torn biceps. So he's still playing through that, but you don't really know how much longer you have with him because, his age and he's injury prone. So
sure.
He's definitely a liability on the line right now, too.
So you think what's kind of happening, too, is that, and this is also why it's hard to repeat, especially in the NFL, how physical the sport is sometimes it's not the guys that go on IR. Sometimes it's just the wear and tear of the Super Bowl and then coming back, and you got to raise your level every week, and part of raising that level every week is the physical level. It just isn't I'm inspired to beat the Super Bowl champs. It's the physicality of the opponent going up against the Eagles every week, and the Eagles having to raise their physicality every week to match that, or else they find themselves in trouble. And it's not like the Eagles are getting blown out or anything like that. It's little things here and little things there. So talk about this game with Jacksonville, because the Jags, to me it's completely different. The Jags look terrible. I'm going to be really surprised if the Eagles do not win this football game, just because of the way the Eagles, the Jags have played, especially with Bortles. I can imagine the Jacksonville defense kind of just all of a sudden having a good game, but Bortles right now, the way they're going, without Fournette, I don't know how the Jags move the football. Eagles have got to win this game, don't they?
Yeah, I definitely think that this is a must-win game. I don't think anyone's saying, counting the Eagles out of the playoff race right now just because of how underwhelming the NFC East is. But I definitely think they can't beat Jacksonville, who's completely broke down right now, especially after Dallas just destroyed them 2 weeks ago. I definitely think it's a must-win for the Eagles, just kind of not only for their record and for the rest of the league to see, but just kind of for themselves and kind of get that confidence back. But the only thing that worries me with this game is that whole time change. Jacksonville's used to playing in London.
Yep.
Our team isn't. So that's always something that you have to take into consideration, because it can just make players exhausted. It's happened before. So that's probably my only worry going into this week.
Who is going to be the number one running back if they don't acquire someone? Or do you think or is that the spot where you really believe that they probably will find a running back in the next week?
I'm looking at it now. I'm still waiting to find out what happened, but Wendell Smallwood actually wasn't at practice today.
Okay.
And he's been in the mix. Clement's fine, but he's not like a feature back or anything. So, as of right now, if Smallwood isn't good to go on Sunday, I have to imagine they're going to try and make some sort of move at running back. Originally, I thought they would just kind of roll with Smallwood, Clement, Adams. But, the way it's looking right now, if Smallwood does have some sort of significant injury, then they do have to find somebody because it doesn't look like Darren Sproles is coming back anytime soon either.
Okay. What about players that have actually played better than you thought when the season began? I know there's a lot of negativity around the team so far this season, but any players that have surprised you in a positive way?
I definitely think, Carson Wentz obviously coming off of a major injury. I think aside from his one issue last week where he kind of choked the game away, I think he's playing his best football right now. I mean, he looks really good throwing the ball.
Okay.
Alshon Jeffrey is another one. You didn't think he would come off his injury and look the way he did, but he was making some phenomenal catches last week.
How's Goddard doing?
Obviously.
The tight end, Goddard. How's he doing?
Goddard, he's finally starting to hit his stride on the team. I think early on in the season, his first week, like week one, was really bad for Goddard. He had a few drops, and then I think they kind of shied away from using him. They put in Joshua Perkins. And then I think now they're finally, with Wentz back, they're feeling comfortable with Goddard. He had a touchdown last week. So I definitely think him and Ertz are going to start hitting their stride together.
All right. And what about and how about somebody like Sidney Jones? I know, of course, the injury with Jones is and you mentioned the secondary has been a problem. Is he part of the problem? Are some of those? Give me the players that have underachieved in the secondary.
Jones had a hot start to the season. Then he kind of got exposed a little bit, but I don't really fault him for much because he was playing pretty good, and it was pretty clear he got injured, and that kind of affected him.
Okay.
But in the secondary, definitely, Ronald Darby's been really inconsistent. Like he'll play really great one week, and then the next week he's not playing good at all. And then I don't think Jalen Mills is maybe one good week this year, so he's been underwhelming as well.
All right, if you had to pick one position, the Eagles make a trade, one position, what is it going to be?
Now, do you want me to tell you what I want or tell you what I think they're going to do?
Who do you want?
Oh, I would like. I think they need to somehow find a cornerback or a safety, something to fix up that secondary.
You mean maybe somebody from Arizona?
I wanted Patrick Peterson, but apparently he just put out a statement about a half hour ago saying he's staying. So
okay.
That doesn't look like it's happening.
How about the kid Buchanan? I know he's more like a hybrid safety linebacker.
You know
he
what?
could be traded.
Actually, that's the same thing with that's what Jenkins does. Jenkins plays a lot of he'll play safety, he'll play linebacker, he'll play in the nickel. So I mean, I would love that, but it doesn't seem like the Eagles are too intrigued with him. It seems like if they're going to make a trade, it might be a corner, and it looks like they might be eyeing up Garyon Conley from the Raiders.
Okay.
So they actually had interest in him last year with the draft, and they ended up taking Barnett instead because, he had those off-field issues. But it definitely seems like if they're going to trade for someone in the secondary, it might be Conley.
All right. So how's before I let you go, how's the schedule looking for I haven't looked at the schedule for the Eagles. How's the next few weeks going? Where they have a bye, right, after London?
Yeah, it goes London bye, and then they're going to play the Cowboys when they get back. So, yeah, that'll be a good one. That's going to be on Sunday Night Football.
Very nice.
Yeah, the schedule doesn't get any easier. They got to play. It's mostly all division games, and they have the Rams, the Saints, Texans. So it definitely doesn't get too easy from here on out.
That's a lot of first place teams. So
yeah.
So they've had to straighten themselves out for sure. First of all,
that's the rough part, because I said before the season started, I was thinking like, all right, so easy first half, and we get these wins out. So if we kind of start to fall apart after the bye a little bit, it'll be okay. But now we're kind of in like panic mode here.
Well, one win can change it. They take care of Jacksonville, and then you get the week off and prepare for the rival Cowboys. That's got to bother you, because it would bother me. I watch, while I'm doing work all the time, and I've got the TV on, and I record some of these shows, these top talk shows on ESPN and FS1, and I'm always listening to, like, what are they talking about? And right. I can't, every freaking day for the past, 2 months, there's a story about the Cowboys. Right. Every freaking day. And I never hear anything about the Eagles. That must bother you. If you were in my shoes listening to this stuff, it would bother me. I just won a Super Bowl, and you're talking about the Cowboys every day?
It's at the point where I'm just so used to it. It's a huge market, and that's we love to hate it. So
yeah, that's true.
I guess it's not so bad.
No, that'll give you some motivation in a couple of weeks, right?
Right.
All right, Justin, I appreciate it. Hopefully when we talk again in the next month or so, we'll talk with better times for the Eagles, and they'll be back in first place.
Hopefully
where they belong. Thanks, Justin. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
Take care.
Right, see ya.
All right, that's Justin Grasso from Inside the Eagles, and Justin was with me to preview training camp and also the NFC East before the season began. So good checking back with Justin on how things are going with the Eagles. And I have the Eagles on my futures. I took them. When did I take them? I took them a few weeks ago. I post the futures up on my website, which is primesportsnetwork.com. Where did I put the Eagles? I took them a few. When did I take them? I took them October 11th at 25-1. And right now, what are they? They are still 25-1. And I put 200 on them at that point. So, yeah, so that's not bad. That brings back $5,000. And I think it's still I would do it even right now, because they're still talented, and yes, they have some injuries. Every team deals with injuries, and remember what happened. And I didn't talk about this with Justin, but remember last year's injuries for the Eagles. The Eagles had a lot of injuries last year, including Carson Wentz, and they still won the Super Bowl. So they don't even have those injuries. And I know they're going to be playing tough teams, but I think it all takes care of itself, the whole schedule thing, just like Justin was thinking about, hey, get off to a good start, and now here come the tough. I don't think a lot of that matters. I just don't. If you're a good football team and you're hot and you just start to pick things up at the certain time of year, I think if you are a really good football team, it's not going to matter. If you're a good football team or an average football team, then it could matter. Then you look back at the season that was a little bit disappointing, and you go, yeah, I think it was just that, when we were cold, we couldn't take advantage of the games. Then we played our best football. It was the toughest part of our schedule. It just didn't work out for us. The timing wasn't right for us. But the Eagles are a Super Bowl championship team, so I think they can get hot and deal with the schedule they're playing and beat those teams. But yeah, they're going to, a light switch is going to have to turn on. Remember last week we talked about it, that beating the Giants, I took the Eagles in that Carolina game, and I said it. I said, look, I'm going to gamble on the fact that I think that the Giant game will start the Eagles going in the right direction. And I lost. But I was up 17-0 in the fourth quarter, or 17 points in the fourth quarter, whatever it was. And I take that again. I'll keep betting on that again. So I think the Eagles will be fine as long as they beat the Jags on Sunday. And yes, you can throw in the London deal and exactly what Mark and Justin said, but I don't care about any of that. The Eagles are a better football team than Jacksonville. So if they can't beat the Jags, then I think we can say they're in big, big trouble. Still not going to rule it out that they would come back because they can open up with the Cowboys in the second half. And remember, this is an NFC East division. So the Redskins are not going to be playing. They are just not good enough to be like 9-2. So that's just not going to happen. They ain't running away with anything. So, but it would be a lot easier if you just took care of business in London, and then had the week off and kind of got psychologically and physically kind of recharged the batteries and get ready for the second half of the season, because that's the perfect time of the season to have a bye week, to have that off week is right dead center in the middle of the season. So anyway, I like the Eagles, 3 points. I know, as I said with Mark's, I think, and Mark gave some really good points about what to be wary about. And I have lost a lot of games this season in the NFL where my team has won and not covered, which is very unusual, but I'm sticking with it. I've got a whole half season to go. That's what handicapping is. You stick with what you believe in. You stick with what's worked for many years in the past. And I've had a lot of times, like in the NFL right now, I'm getting buried in the NFL so far. With my point system, what am I down? Like $600 or something? But because I'm up nearly 3,000 in college, I'm still doing very well in football. But the NFL is burying me right now, or I'd be even doing that much better. But I still will stick with the plan. I also feel confident as the season goes on. I get smarter about teams. And then, therefore, because I am not like Marc Lawrence, I'm not a professional handicapper, so he relies on a completely different set of facts that I do. I'm more of what I see as an analyst than a handicapper. So I will educate myself even as the season goes on. I have a whole half season to go, and I know I'm going to have a week in the NFL where I'm going to have a great week. It'll come in the next few weeks, and hopefully then I'll be fine the rest of the year. And then because all I have to do is have one really good week in the NFL, and I'll get back to square one. I'll go back to zero balance. And considering how good I'm doing in college football this year, then that's all I have to do in the NFL. But as far as the Eagles are concerned, at 25-1, I still think they're a pretty good bargain right now. And what did I have last week? I went with Kansas City for the first time. I think they're a bargain at 7-1. So I put 500 on to Chiefs last week, and I already have I've got 1,000 on the Rams at 4-1. And I usually won't do that unless I'm very confident about certain teams in the NFL. And that's why some of the favorites, like the Patriots, the Chiefs, and the Rams, I put money on. Because I'm pretty confident that I feel pretty good that 2 out of those 3 teams are going to end up in the Super Bowl. But I still have money on Baltimore and the Chargers and the Vikings. And I'm trying to see here, Baltimore and Carolina. The only team that I have money on out of the teams I have in futures in the NFL that I'm not looking good at all, that I think I just completely wasted $300 on, was Jacksonville. That's it. And Jacksonville could still get hot. And the reason they could still get hot is because of the fact that they could still get Fournette back. And look, they've got some injuries too. And the injuries that they have are affecting them. If you've been listening to me for the past couple of years since they've drafted Fournette and Fournette started playing, even at that time, his rookie season, I said it. The Jags have got to get another running back on this roster. And I thought the Ivory move was okay, but he was an older player. He's not over the hill. It's just an older player that can break down a little bit more because of his physical style over his career. That's why he never stays healthy. He plays a game or two, and then he's on the shelf. But they haven't done that, and it's affecting them right now because Yeldon is being asked to do everything now, especially with Grant out. And that's just, I'm sorry, but you can't do that to TJ Yeldon. He's a nice little player. He's a good rotation player, but he ain't no bell cow. And the Jags are a bell cow, physical running football team. And they've completely taken their identity on offense out. And then they have thrown all of the responsibility to Blake Bortles. And you cannot do that. And that's why I think they've made a big mistake. They've made two big mistakes in personnel with all the great things that they've done to build a nearly AFC Championship team. They've done two things wrong. They have not added a second quarterback capable of leading that team. They should. I mean, how on earth don't they go after Teddy Bridgewater? I don't know. I could not. I mean, for what the Jets. I mean, I would think that the Jags could have said, "Okay, we'll give you a third and a player." You know, if we have to compete with the Saints for a third, you know, or something like that. But whatever the case, or a third, and we'll give you another draft pick. We'll give you a sixth and a third. You know what I'm saying? Something that will just beat what the Saints' offer was to make sure Bridgewater's on this roster. And then you've had a couple of years to get, and you know, any running back, any physical running back that they could have chosen. And I mean, I'm not looking right now at their draft situation, and on the players that they could have selected. Let me see. Let me get it right now. Where's my draft? Our Lads Draft Recap magazine. Here it is. I got it all laid out here. Here it is, the review guide for 2018. So let's see what Jacksonville passed on. Let's see, any of these players are doing anything for them. Or let's see. Well, they went after Taven Bryan. Now, he's a good player in the first round, but honestly, did you really believe that the Jags, with the best defense in football last year, needed to go with a defender in their first pick? They wasted a pick on Tanner Lee, the quarterback from Nebraska, in the 6th round. And I'm sorry, but yes, you can find running backs in the 6th round in the NFL. Completely wasted that pick. I mean, Tanner Lee, please. And really, if you think about it, 2 of their top 3 picks this past year, 1st and 3rd round pick, defense. Defense. I mean, that's a team that's saying, well, we're not trying to necessarily go for it this year. We're just trying to build smartly. We're looking at contracts. We're looking at age. We're trying to make sure that we bring in guys that will take over in the next couple of years. And I'm sorry, but there's nobody's saying to go out like the Patriots and just mortgage everything to try to win a championship now. But you have to be a little bit conscious of the fact that we're in a zone here where we just missed out on a Super Bowl, and we need to just keep that momentum going. And in order to do that, we have to make sure that what works for us the most is backed up, as well as what is our biggest question mark is backed up, and they failed to do both. They did not put together an adequate number 2 quarterback, and they did not back up Leonard Fournette. So, matter of fact, I don't know. I'm trying to remember. Yeah, actually, let me go to Our Lads Draft Guide running backs so I can recall. And again, I'm only looking at this year because I'm not going to go crazy about, taking a look at all the running backs from the past couple of years. But I'm just going to throw some running backs that I think would have fit the mold that were available for Darius Geis. Now, Darius Geis would have definitely fit the mold. And you could say, yeah, but he got hurt. You can't predict that. And you can't even predict if Darius Geis would have been with the Jags that he would have got hurt. It's a circumstance thing. But Geis would have been a perfect backup. He also went to LSU. I mean, Geis, physical running back, would have been perfect. But nope, not going to do it. Matter of fact, let's go to... And I'm only looking at physical running backs. But, I mean, you got Nick Chubb from Georgia. Let's see. Then we can take a look at just talent. You know what? I mean, I would have even taken Darrell Williams at LSU. I mean, there are running backs out there. Even right now, the Jags can make a trade for a running back. I don't know why they haven't. But they could have also, just for talent-wise, they could have also, went after Kerryon Johnson at running back. They could have gone after Royce Freeman, Nyheim Hines, just so they had more talent, period. But but for me, it would have been all about getting a running back that would have fit the Leonard Fournette mold. And the mold of the Jags, which is we're a physical football team. We are, just listening to Jalen Ramsey in training camp, and they're trying to be the bullies of the NFL. And if you're going to be a bully team, you need to have a bully running back, and they have that. But what happens when the bully running back gets hurt? And the reason that we warned the Jags about this was because of Leonard Fournette's history. He had an injury history. He also had a red flag history as far as his mental state. And we even saw him get into a little bit of trouble last year. So now he hasn't gotten into big trouble, and he hasn't until this time been really hurt. And look, he hasn't been out the whole year. But this is the thing. Here's a guy that has a history of missing games for a variety of reasons. We should have a viable number 2 guy. And they never did that, and they're paying for it. So anyway, that's something that maybe we could talk about sometime in the coming weeks and get our Jags contributor on here and when it's time to dig into the Jags. But anyway, thanks to Justin Grasso, co-editor for Inside the Eagles at Fansided, talking Eagles football. And, of course, Marc Lawrence at experts.covers.com. He'll be back with us next Wednesday. Ted Zavransky will be with me tomorrow. Bill Huber, talking Packers football, will be with me tomorrow. And we'll talk some fantasy football with Scott Engel from rotoexperts.com. Make sure to check out our lads, the best depth charts in the industry, both pro and college football. Thanks for listening to the OFN Today on the Our Lads Football Radio Network. You know the drill. Alpha, Mike, Foxtrot.